Here, we'll let a couple of people find chairs. I'll ask a question that I always ask before I do any presentation. Anybody here at my last presentation here 2 years ago? Okay, it's a pretty good amount. Anybody on my podcast group? Same people. That's good. All right, so we can get started here. My layout is a portion of Conrail's Lehigh line, and I'm modeling the area between Sayre and Allentown. Those are my two staging yards. Most of it is concentrated around the greater Pittston, Scranton area and the area along what's called the Snake's Path, up along the Susquehanna River. It's the former Lehigh Valley main line. And the layout is fairly far along. So basically what we're going to be updating here is what's gone on since the last clinic here. So this was actually my final slide at the last clinic. I was in the process of building a roundhouse segment at Pittston Yard. I'd never built anything like that before, so it was a very interesting structure to build because it didn't have a whole lot of right angles. With the roof slope and the curvature of the front and all of that, there was a lot of figuring out. I used some segments of the Walters roundhouse pits. Other than that, it's a total scratch build in styrene, and I just had a ball doing it. There was a back shop behind it that is being kit bashed out of some Walters pieces as well. So that's where we left off 2 years ago. Here's a finished product, looking a bit nicer, I think. The painting and weathering on the structure really kind of makes it come to life. In my era, 1984, the area in front where the pit would normally be has been filled in, so that's what the trackage going into the two stalls there represents. So Pittston Junction was really the next big project that I picked up. This was an important modeling interest of mine on the layout, but I soon found that even when I'm designing a building from scratch, which is what this area of the layout is in, it's an addition I actually put onto my house. It's not easy to put a junction in because it takes up a lot of real estate. So when I was building the addition, the guys that were coming to break ground the next day had laid all the lines out on the ground, ready for the excavator. And when I got back home, I went out there with my plan and my tape measure and a sharp stick, and I started scratching the diagrams into the dirt of what I wanted to do there. And to my horror, I realized that I was going to have a cramped situation for Pittston Junction and the Pocono Northeast branch, which was going to be down along this wall. So when the guys came the next morning, I said, guess what? We need to bump this out 4 feet. So my contractor knew me. So he said, what about the town? I said, they won't even notice, trust me. And they didn't. They came to do the inspection, and the guy said, wow, look at all this framing, this is cool. No problem. So it's better to ask for forgiveness than permission a lot of the time. So this is my starting point for Pittston Junction. You notice that there's a little bit of scenic area that's just sort of leading off here. This is a Duryea. And down below here, this is my Sayre staging yard. This is the Conrail main line. This is the mountain cutoff that was put in to get a better route around the mountain. Makes a big loop, obviating the need for the line that went into Wilkes-Barre. And this track right here is the Taylor Secondary. This was installed by Conrail after the fact so that trains that were coming in from the north could get onto the Taylor Secondary and go to Conrail trackage that had been kept by Conrail in that area. So to start to do Pittston Junction, I did my standard ground cover. People ask me what I use for dirt. I use dirt. I dig it up out of my backyard. The price is right. I let it dry very thoroughly in the furnace room, and then I just sift it and put it down with a standard glue and water mixture. The ballast that I use, I get a lot of questions about that. This is a blasting medium that was used by Anchor Hawking to do their glass etching, and a Conrail engineer who delivered covered hoppers of the stuff there obtained a fair amount of it, and I bought that off of him, and it's the best Conrail ballast that I've seen. Rumor has it that I'll be selling off what I have left as I complete Conrail. The little piece of wood here is the future Pittston Yard office. You notice it's got a little bit of a sloping roof to it, and it is sized exactly. A friend of mine works for the Reading and Northern, and he was able to take very good measurements of the building, window dimensions, everything. So when I was to model it later, that really came in handy. This road from down here extends all along the yard, and you can see the access road getting ready to be put into a grade crossing across here. Everything from this frog to this frog is all Pocono Northeast. That's the short line. Mike Confalone helped me with the backdrop. I took all of those photos from inside the Y of the junction there. It does help to have friends that work on the railroad. That was the only way I could get the right perspective for the photos themselves. And Lance Minheim, another buddy of mine, helped me de-skew a lot of the photos. Mike stitched them all together, and we sent them off to his very good printer down in Pennsylvania. And I was a little intimidated about cutting out the top edges of the backdrop. It's like 12 feet long, and I had not put up something that detailed. So another buddy of mine, my buddy Dave Santos, and Mike came down to help me put up the backdrop. We used a certain kind of wallpaper paste that actually worked really well to put it up. It's held firmly, but it allowed enough wiggle time to get everything exactly the way you want. And the hardest part was the cutout, but he said, I'll cut it out for you. So he was there in my dining room cutting it out that morning before we put it up. You'll notice that it's a big difference, because that was just a blank wall there. And when you put up the backdrop, it just kind of opens it up, as you'll see in some of the photos moving forward. The way we did it was, he was in that aisle, I was on top of the layout here on this foam pad, my buddy Dave was in the aisle here, kind of like feeding it to me, and the whole thing went up in about 10 minutes flat. It was unbelievable. That's immediately after putting it up and getting the foam pad off of there. As you can see on the little wood block, I've actually put a printed photo of the actual yard office there. So at this point, starting to do the little grade crossings and getting that in place, but it gives you an idea now of how the backdrop looks from various photo angles. So here the backdrop photo, obviously, it's a weird wall in that at this point, this area of the layout kind of spreads out into an area where it can actually physically have things. So we took great care to make sure that the backdrop houses were sized properly to look right with the physical houses that were there. Starting to do some ground cover here, just starting to put some trees in and some static grass. That really helps to make it come to life, and you can see that the coloring of the trees and the coloring of the trees on the backdrop is spot on. That's all Confalone. My standard method for putting in trees in clumps like this is to take some green floral foam and carve it out to fit, and then it gets hit with earth-colored paint and more dirt painted on, and that becomes the armature for holding the trees. So once again, here's the Conrail main, Taylor secondary, the street's in, the lines are on the street, and it's starting to get the right perspective that I was looking for. A few details come to mind here. You know, the pipe gate coming in, some old tie piles. One of the things that is going to go right about here is a sign commemorating the mine disaster that happened in Pittston in the 50s that ended up closing most of the mines in that area, and is the cause of the Lackawanna River being orange to this day. So actually, this shot is taken right from Pittston Yard with my phone right on the tracks, and just trying to see how a telephoto would look.
Those twin pine trees or evergreens, are those real trees or are they part of the backdrop?
Thank you. That's the right question.
Okay.
Those are on the backdrop.
How did you do the sky? Cut the sky?
Well, again,
You can't see an edge.
I let Mr. Fussy cut out the, I don't know if I ever had the patience, but he's got, the thing is, he's always given me a little bit of a hard time about the color of my backdrop sky. And yet, when we printed the photo, obviously they had the backdrop sky in the photo, and the color match was uncanny. So the reason I painted my walls this color is that's typically what the sky looks like around there.
Mm-hmm.
So what he does is he makes sure to save all the little fines, but the color match between the paint and the little edge that gets left is so close that you really don't notice it. This telephone pole is on the backdrop as well. In fact, so is this one. But you'll see real poles on another photo coming up, I think. There's a close-up of it. So you'll notice, here's some telephone lines that don't continue. But when you stand there and look at it, you never see it. But you're right, those two trees really give it a depth to the scene. That sign is on the backdrop as well. So it's always tricky to get a blending of the backdrop photo with your foreground scenery and make it work. This one just worked. So here's the yard office. I already mentioned my buddy Tony V. This is not his picture, obviously, but this is a picture from 1984. So I was able to tell exactly what this thing looked like in my modeling era. And there's the finished product. The sign itself is actually taken from that photo and reduced to be the right size. The air conditioner is some plastic one that I bought, but the grill on the end of it is also photo cut from the prototype photo and pasted onto the end of it. The awnings are from Monster Model Works, but basically a scratch build, and a fun scratch build in that. So, the area we were just looking at is right in here, Pittston Junction. This is the P&E branch that couldn't have happened had I not gotten those extra 4 feet out of the contractors. And do you think I would have liked an extra 2 in retrospect? I probably should have gone out like 2 more feet. Could have gotten more depth here. But to tell you what's going on here, this just kind of sat here as a blank piece of plywood until I actually decided what I was going to be doing. You'll notice at your standard grid construction, the staging yard for the D&H is under here, and I extended it down so that I'd have some tracks here to make it easier for me to restage trains in the future. You'll notice that this sub-road bed here is curving out to this weird little contraption here, and this is actually steel here. So this is actually something I had my welder, we've all got a welder, right? A first private personal welder that welds things for you. I had my welder make up this frame for me so that the, I don't know what I would call this. It's like a socket, really, I guess, that my removable cross aisle bridge goes into to allow me to get down the other side of the aisle across from Pittston Yard. I wanted it to be absolutely dimensionally stable, so this block mounts right to that. And there's this track here, but then there's tracks that need to go in between. So really, the reason for this track is solely to get to another area of the room. It doesn't belong in this scene. So I needed to hide this track, and yet you can see how close it's going to be to the foreground track. So the way I'm hiding it is to build a building. That track is actually going to traverse inside this building the entire 7.5 foot length and pop out on the other side, as you will see. Meanwhile, here's the foreground part of the scene. So right now I'm just using some Monster Model Works concrete block sheets to kind of figure out my proportions. There's a lot of highs and lows to this building, as you'll see, so I'm in the very early stages here. This is actually taken from across the aisle where Confalone was standing. So this one actually explains it a little bit better. So you can see how the track now is going to be going through these cutouts in the back of the building. And here are the tracks for the industry itself. This is just regular 1/4 inch Luan plywood. So when you make a big building, you need a big spot to start building it, right? So I usually do things on the outfeed table on my table saw. This building, as you'll soon see, definitely challenged that because it really needed to be built in one piece. So here now we're starting to cantilever it off the end of the outfeed table. Here's a picture of the prototype. I'm always working closely from prototype photos. I actually got lucky with this because this is a view of the plant that you can't get from the street, and you'll notice it's kind of like a high quality aerial. Somebody flew a drone down the back of the plant, posted it, and it got onto Google Maps somehow, and I was able to pause it, take screenshots, go again, take screenshots. I was able to get very good photos from an angle that I never could have gotten any other way. Lots of clamps were involved. Scott's clinic, he was talking about, he used like 200 clamps on some of his glue ups. I have a lot of clamps in all shapes and sizes, and I was running out as I was doing parts of this building. Here you can see there's a strip down here. I just made the concrete foundation out of some MDF and ran that all along where it was appropriate. These are the Monster Model Works sheets, and they're backed up with 1/4 inch plywood. More 1/4 inch plywood is used for bracing, and here's a corner piece that's being glued in. So lots and lots of bracing on this wooden structure were used. The entire thing was put together using canopy glue, which was ideal for this because, again, you've got some wiggle time, but it sets up fairly quickly. I found that I could do a glue up, go upstairs and have dinner, come back down, take the clamps off, and do another one. So it was a highly iterative build. This is a close-up of the corner pieces that Jimmy Simmons bakes for his concrete block material. He's got the same thing for his bricks as well. I think his concrete block material is just outstanding. It's the best I've seen, and you can get it in big sheets so you don't have many seams to hide. All of this, like this vertical line here, once you kind of paint this and grout it, it just tends to go away. I use a lot of these 1, 2, 3 blocks also for squaring things up and holding them in position while I'm gluing things. You can see the plywood backing that I'm using on the block sheet. Lots of interior bracing. Now, you can see that what I found to be one of the most challenging areas of this build was that the building, as you'll see as it gets bigger in future shots, has all kinds of different heights. Some of them are lower, and then it goes up again, and you have to account for that. So this face here, you can see this roof line drops down. That needs to be all faced with concrete block material, and it has to be level. Obviously, you can't just run it up. So there was a lot of planning required to get all of that in place. Good example of it right there. So you see how this is horizontal? But it's at an angle, so it was very tricky to figure out how far you had to cut this down so it overlapped. Very interesting carpentry aspect of this building. But it was a great building to build out of wood because it was so huge. If I was building this out of my usual styrene, it would have required a lot more interior bracing. You don't want it to bow or warp. More gluing and clamping. You can see how the building, most of it now is sticking out on that side of the table saw. Another example of another drop down. All different heights. It's getting big now. It's still going, but it's probably, 5.5, 6 feet at this point. And there's a sheet of wax paper down here so that I don't accidentally glue the building to the outfeed table. Another view of that same big glue up. At this point, I think this is the last module, but you can see how we're high, a little bit lower, a lot lower, back up again, much lower. I kept trying it in place because when you're building something this big with this much into it, you want to make sure you're not making some tragic mistake that could have been avoided, too early. You want to get that early in the project. Here's all the prototype photos that I was going by. That's that across the aisle view again. So this is the whole building now. The last thing I'm doing is this little alcove here, and you'll see there's some bins that are going here. This is where the track will exit from. So it's inside all the way along here, and there's something that gets built on top of here. So I built a subfloor for it basically, and I drilled a couple of holes in it to enable me to kind of pick the whole thing up and thread it out from the workshop back into the layout room above the backdrops. So this structure needed to be built on top of this angled roof line. So I used my Starrett gauge here and made a template so I would get the angle right. There's all the pieces cut out. There it is put together, and there it is in place. A lot of white there. It's hard to believe that this is actually blue. I think the projector's washing it out a little bit because when I look on the laptop, it's not quite so washed out. I guess that's all we can say about this one. So in order to get this platform that is being built next for the bins and the elevator, the only way I could figure out how to determine the height was to use my level. I thought that was the easiest way to figure it out. Some math major might have done it differently. The elevator was going to be right up front. It's going to be 12 inches from you while you're standing there, so I wanted it to be nicely detailed. So I bashed it out of some Rick's parts and the Walther's etched metal brass parts. Ends up a nice build. So it's an unusual elevator in that it goes into a concrete pit somehow. I don't know why. But basically the covered hoppers dump the calcium chloride in a pit between the rails. It goes by auger into the elevator and goes up, and then it can go into either one of these two bins that are going to be there. So it's almost like building a grain mill, but it's not for grain. This is another bin that I had to construct. Early stages of fabricating the bin. Oh, I'm sorry, that's wrong. That is the shaft for the elevator. So you can see how it's going to be like a lined pit that the elevator mounts into. So it has to be mounted at a height so that this platform is even with here, and there's the entrance into it. And then I have to do a cross-platform railings set up to get to each of the bins. Painted. Now the railings are on the tops of the bins. And I've actually started to do the concrete base. This is another bin that I'm building that's a parallelogram. That was an interesting thing to build up. You'll see where that goes in a second. These are lines that I drew with machinist square that matched up all around the bin for all of the cross pieces, the reinforcing cross pieces to be glued on, like so. Totally scratch built except for a couple of these things out of the scratch box, the kit bashing box. So there's the two bins. This is using some other components that I salvaged from some kit. This is a different elevator that's built for this end of the building. So there's two elevators on this structure. There's the weathered version of the bin, again going by the prototype photos. And that's where they go on the prototype. So the structure is very, very close to the prototype, both in terms of the sizing of each module and the total length of it. It's probably about 95% the size of the prototype. The only thing I did differently is these two bins are on the other side of the building on the prototype, and they were just too interesting to have behind the building, plus I've got a track there, so I just moved them up front, which in this case is in back. Here, I'm just adding the portion that goes into the building and using the square to get it lined up just right. So back to the other elevator now. These are the pipes that go down to actually feed the silos. The silos have been glued in place, and I'm using a big socket and one of those 1, 2, 3 blocks to weight it down in place so that this doesn't end up moving it. Dirt for ground cover, as usual. And I always can't resist taking a few shots with freight cars for perspective. More weeds and things to blend the base of the building into the landscape. This downspout covers a vertical seam in the concrete block material. And in this case now we've started to do some weathering. So the whitishness on the concrete is probably some spillage of lading, and I guess all of this rust stuff is because this calcium chloride rusts anything it touches. This is a place that makes ice melt. Some of these grills are 3D printed parts that I got off the internet. This big door is for forklifts to drive with pallets of the material that are stored in a lot out here, that in my case would be in the aisle. So, if you look closely between the trees, you can just about see that track from this photo angle. That's the track we're trying to hide, but the clump of trees thoroughly hides it. So really, all you see while you're standing there working the industry is this track that belongs to it. So, this building would have been longer than the Milazzo Industries building. This is Foster Wheeler in the Crestwood Industrial Park, which is right near Mountaintop in Pennsylvania. And this building was built in the late 50s, and they constructed large pressure vessels and some generators and a couple of smaller things in this plant. It has an incredible footprint and an amazing track arrangement, interplant track arrangement. And I badly wanted to have this consignee for the traffic that it generated, both in terms of raw materials in and interesting loads out. So looking at this, I thought, all right, how can I compress this thing and still have it look right? A little bit better aerial of it. I quickly realized that if I wanted all the tracks that come in and out of these doors, that there's no way to compress it from a width standpoint. So my model is almost the same height as this building, exactly the same width, and probably 40% of the length. So it's shorter, but it still looks very long on the model railroad. This is a much later picture of the same building, but I included it because it shows you all of this interesting, whatever the heck is going on here. You know, you've got your ladder cage, you've got this elevator type of thing, other panels that were put along here. This is when Morrison Knudsen was rebuilding locomotives in this facility after Foster Wheeler went out of business. So again, here I am back on the table saw, and I decided that I was going to build the core of this building out of wood as well. So this building is entirely built out of 1/4-inch Luan plywood. Here you can see the door openings have all been cut out for both ends, and the basic shape is intact. And here's a big side. The glue up starts, standard gluing procedures, but you notice that there are now lines drawn on here. These lines represent where I need the siding to hit in order to look right according to the prototype pictures. So if I had to make any adjustments, I want to be able to know what I'm doing at this stage. But the building is extensively braced, as you can see here. All of the interior bracing was cut out of very, very dry, very old vertical grain fir that's not going to warp on me. I had some of it left over from a house project. But you can see that even though the building is much shorter, it still looks pretty long for a model railroad structure. Shaping up now, these are the roof pieces that I made up to get the slight pitch to the roof and span the roof, because I wanted the roof to be removable. There's trackage inside the building, so anytime you have that, it's a good idea to be able to get back inside. So there's the roof in place. What I did was take another piece of Luan, kerf it right down the center on my table saw so that I could bow it enough to glue it to those pieces that you just saw. And there's a view of that. There's the kerf, there's the angled pieces. So what I did was put the angled pieces on the building, but not glue them in place because the roof needs to be removable. And then I glued on top of those pieces, put the Luan down on the building, and then every heavy weight I could get my hands on, I put on the plywood to get it to sit while it glued up. Did some clamping as well. So that other picture that I showed you of the elevator side of the plant, this is the beginning of the construction of that out of the same material. And now you can see it's just starting to come together, and I'm trying to see how my tracks are going to work with this. There's a lot of complicated trackage out in this area. This area that you can see back here, this is the Pocono Northeast that runs about 25 feet along that wall. It's very narrow, but it's very long, and it gives you the ability to recreate this rambling Pocono Northeast short line that's going to go there. Is that a question back there?
Yeah.
Okay.
Why are the heights different for the openings?
That's a great question, and I don't know. The only thing I can guess is that these were of a certain height to accommodate certain loads that come out of the plant on flat cars. This one here is a truck door, I think, because there was never a track here. So I decided that I would bin the entire structure just to avoid it having any tendency to warp on me from absorbance of moisture. That took a minute because there's a lot of nooks and crannies inside this thing, but I think it was worth it. Here I am starting to figure out how I'm going to space and apply my siding. Now, the building is entirely covered with metal siding on the prototype, and there was no way that I was going to be able to do that with a building of this size and be able to replicate the individual vertical panels. I'd still be doing it. You know, it would have taken forever, and I think it would have been, it's like the kind of thing you do on a small country grain elevator, but on a large industrial structure like this, where the panels are all pretty much smooth on the structure. You want to be able to indicate those vertical lines, but you don't really want any bowing in that spot. So I decided I was going to do it out of evergreen scribe styrene. I think this is 030 siding material. And all of the lengths of it were cut out of large sheets on my little Micromark table saw. So there's most of the siding in place now. Here I'm playing with some colors, trying to get the color that I'm looking for, but we'll get to that. Prototype photos, very useful, although this is in MK days, it's beaten enough that I think this is close enough to the look that I'm trying to achieve. So notice the blanked out windows on the top. They're just boarded up windows. Here are the big doors that we were talking about, but you can see all the vertical lines. These are all the vertical lines. Those are basically just drawn in with pan pastels and a very fine angled brush, and I use the spacer to get the lines to be consistent. This was something I was trying to do in terms of the boarded up windows, and when I realized what I had to do that manually, I called up my buddy Scott and I said, "Do you think you could laser cut something for me if I gave you the dimensions?" And him and his buddy Sam said, "Absolutely." So later in the photos here, you'll see what they generously produced for me and saved me a ton of time and annoyance. So this is actually the wall side of the structure, but where it's located, you can see this whole side. So I wanted it to be pretty faithful. Here I'm using a dry brush technique to get that greenish color. Here you can see where I've masked it off. I've just finished here and getting ready to do that side. Here's the interior track. Basically what I did was just use thick sheets of styrene to replicate the concrete flooring inside. You'll only be able to see it a little bit through the doors here, so I wasn't too worried about anything down here, or having the tracks go all the way to the end. I just wanted enough track in here that I could put loads in and out. This is the Conrail main line over here. This is the feed to the Crestwood Industrial Park, and this is the lead that comes into the plant. So there it is in place. Not much weathering done to it yet. It's not planted yet in this photo. I've created a bin and a duct for it. This is a sandblasting booth that they had. A little truck door here that I threw in. You can see the sharply curving siding coming into here for the raw materials that are being delivered. Finished products come out this end of the plant. This wall I kind of put off for a while. It was a lot. It was a lot. I think I did this in probably 3 or 4 sessions. Because you can't rush it, you know, and if you get too much on the brush, it doesn't look right. If it's too little, it doesn't look right. You get the hang of it after a while, but it was a lot. This is the side that faces the aisle. Here's the finished product. Dan, there's your load. Hasn't been painted yet in this photo, obviously. So at this point, a lot of the ground cover's in place. It had a lot of roof ventilators, so I put those up there. The only thing that remains is to do some asphalt paving in here. Here are the wooden pieces that Scott and Sam genned up for me. And basically I just did some standard weathering techniques on them to get them to look a little weather beaten. But to me they look right on the building. Added the ladder cage ladder in that spot, and just different views of different things that were done on the building itself. Very interesting building to construct, actually. I enjoyed this one a lot. At the end of the building, where all the steel goes, you need a bridge crane. So I tried the little Walther's bridge crane, and it just looked like a toy next to this building, and it didn't jive with what was in the prototype photos that I saw. So I ended up scratch building my own bridge crane out of Central Valley. No, these are micro-engineering uprights and micro-engineering girders. And I used the Walther's heavy-duty bridge crane. There's literally a piece of rail that is glued on the top of each girder, and I had to figure out how I was going to get into the little housing there. So there's a ladder cage coming up to a platform that the operator can get in on there, but the sheet raw materials are all delivered in this general area. little close-up of that. More brass origami. That's it, folks. Do you have any questions? Speak now.
What were you
Does the
fastening?
big building, the first one, is that have a removable roof also?
That one is designed so that the entire building can be removed,
All right.
intact.
So then the second question is, how flexible is that building with all the cutouts for the traffic?
Absolutely rigid.
Really?
Yeah.
Cool.
I made liberal use of those interior reinforcements with just the square cut out for the train to come through. And that kind of plywood is actually pretty structurally sound. So with the canopy gluing it all together, you could literally hold one end of the building if you were strong enough with your grip, and it would just extend straight out and it wouldn't flex at all. So my goal is to not ever have to do that, and I
I was
probably
wondering, is it a
won't.
one-person job or a two-person job to get it out?
Well, I think it's a one-person job, yeah. I think, I might ask for some help from my buddy Dave if I needed to. See, if you build it so that it can come out, you won't have to take it out. That's my theory on that. Ideally, you don't have to do that. I'd have to fix up a little bit of the ground cover, obviously where the building is planted and all that. But my, experience tells me that if you don't make allowances for that, you will need to.
No good deed goes unpunished.
So, I do an occasional podcast. It used to be monthly, but I got busy and I got old. And I'm still doing it. And there'll be some out this summer. Rumor has it, Scott might be actually joining me on one soon. My website is mrhobby.com. There's a few unique modeling things that I have on there for sale, and a little blurb for Dartmouth Locomotive Works, where I do my sound installs. I have a twice-a-year column for model railroad hobbyists called Getting Real, and a lot of the details of this construction are in articles that you'd see in the paid version of the magazine. It's a couple of bucks. It's definitely worth it. And I've been throwing videos up on my YouTube channel as well, so just in case you don't get enough of me. There'll also be a 3D printed version of me available. But I want to see what it looks like first. Actually, it'll look just like this, won't it? Any other questions? Yes?
Yeah, Mike, there's a rumor going around that you don't actually do your own modeling, that either it's a combination of Mike Confalone or maybe even AI. Maybe you can address that, and maybe we can have some truth here this afternoon.
We'll take that as an outside discussion. All right, thanks, everybody.